So we have here our writing expression in sigma notation. So how are we going to write an expression? So kato ni siyang expanded form and then himuon na to in sigma notation form. So we're going to have let f of I be an expression involving an integer I, and then the expression f of m plus f quantity m plus 1 plus f quantity m plus 2 plus so on and so forth, and then f quantity n. So it can be compactly written in sigma notation, and we write it as like this. So we have our sigma notation, and then we have here our lower bound, which is our I. So here, as you can see, class, sa kani diri nga part diri kay m atong gigamit because that is for our lower bound. So I is equals to m, and then as you can see on the last part, we use f times n, or f of n. So it means that that is for our upper bound. So that is for our upper bound. And now for how about sa ato ang main equation, teacher? So that is mo ni siya tong f of I, or f quantity I. So dapat in ani atong maporma in order for us from this expression ma-turn nato siya into like this, which is sigma notation. Okay? So you know the parts naman in our sigma notation. We just only have lower bound, upper bound, and our equation, in which your equation must be true to all of these corresponding bounds. Okay. So now is we are going to have some examples. So mag-start tag example number 1. So you're going to write this expression into a sigma notation. So we have 1 plus 2 plus 3. Sorry. Write lang ako siya as in ani. So you have there 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 and then plus 32. So that is our expression, and then from this expression is we are going to make this one into our sigma notation. So sa inyong makita diri sa ato ang given class. So unsa kaha atong pattern niya? You can see there 1 and then 2 and then 4, 8, 16 and 32. Unsa nga pattern inyong makita diha? Okay, anyone? They are added by themselves. Added by themselves. Actually, yes, it can be. But if we're just going to make it like simple lang, in which you can use exponents, geometric sequence, sure. Yeah, actually, it's a geometric sequence. And how are we going to write that one? Multiply by 2. Yes, multiply by 2, or it can it also be like we're going to have um exponent. Can we use exponent? Kaya dapat naman tayo value of I, class. Dapat naman tayo value of I. So, diba, in our 1, so sa atong 1 diri, you can have this as um, This is a process of like 2 and then raised to the power of 0. 'Di ba? And then this one that is 2 raised to the power of 0 that is equivalent to 1. Well, ang kani siyang nadiri, you can use 2 and then raised to the power of 1. And then for your 4, you can use 2 raised to the power of 2. And then ang kaning 2 raised to the power 8, that is 2 raised to the power of 3. And then for our 16, that is 2 raised to the power of 4. And then here, sa to ang 32, that is 2 raised to the power of 5. So as you can see here, everything is 2 and then raised by a number. In which, if we're going to write that one, kung pila sila ka terms diha class, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 terms man sila, no? So if we're going to write that one into sigma notation, it can be, ang lower bound niya, which is I, is equivalent to 0 or from 0 and then to 5. And then if we're going to have your equation, you can use 2 raised to the power of I. Okay, you have there 2 raised to the power of I. In which kung imo i-substitute ang I nimo into 0, so that is equivalent to 1. If we're going to substitute I into 2, that is equivalent to 2. Because 2 quantity or 2 times 2, that is 2 times 1, that is 2. And then you have there 2 raised to the power of 2, that is 2 times 2, that is 4. And then so on and so forth. So makuha nimo balik imuhang expression. So kato yung gihan ganina nga we have here gi-multiply og 2, which is okay lang gihapon siya, but how are we going to use I? Kay dapat naman tay I always class. And that kanang I is mo na tong mo siya atong i-substitute sa imuhang pag-solve in order makuha nimo imong expression balik. Okay? Okay? So, questions for this first example.
None, Chair.
None ra? Okay, very good. So, malang yun to atong naon nga, it should be naatay I. Okay, kay for example, if may unta nga, 2 times I. So, if mag 2 times I ta, so 2 times 0, 0 na siya daan. So, dili siya ma-apply. Okay? So, pwede ta maka-use atong multiply, pero mangita pa yung way nga mo result jud siya sa imuhang sequence nga gihatag diri. Okay? Nasabtan ra for our first example. Wala right questions? So now, let's go to our next example, number 2. So you have there 1 plus 1 over 2 plus 1 over 3 plus 1 over 4 and then plus, and then ellipsis, you have there 1 over 100. So, in our example here, class, so kaning 1 na to nga whole number, it can be written as 1 over 1 man sa, diba? So, if we're going to look at our numerators, class, are they the same? The same ra ang numerators?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, yes. So, the numerators are the same, so wala tay problema. Now, arita sa to ang denominator. Is there, makita na to nga pattern?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay, we can see patterns. Unsa man atong pattern niya, class?
It keeps on increasing by 1.
Okay, increasing by 1. Now, this time class is ari sa ta mag-first og tan-aw sa to ang M og N. So, sa atong M class, asa man siya nag-start? Nag-start ta sa denominator ta magtan-aw ha kay na may changes ang denominator, ang numerator is wala raman. So, sakto to yung gingon, nag-increase ta og 1. So, kung ari ta mag-start sa tong first term, natay 1 because over 1 man iyahang denominator. Well, here on the last part or in our upper bound, that is equivalent to 100. So, nanakay lower bound, nanakay upper bound. Now, this time is ari na sad ta mag-tanaw for our equation. So, that is I is equal to 1 and then raised to the power or upper bound is 100. So, unsa kaha atong ma-apply ani class nga equation. So, since constant naman iyahang 1, so maybe pwede ra guro ta mag numerator pod og 1. So, unsa kaha atong denominator ani class?
1.
1. Kung
Hi,
mag-denominator tag
sir.
1, so 1 over 1. Okay, that is I. Very good. So, nganong I man, teacher? Kay kung imo na siyang i-substitute imong I, so that is 1 over 1. So, mao ni siya. And then, mag-substitute na sad ka for the next, that is 1 over 2. Mao ni siya. And then, hantod maabot og 100. So, applicable siya and mugawas imuhang expression. So far, na question for our example number 2. So, atong gipangita ra jud diri is ato ra jud gitan-aw diri is maghinta taog na applicable niya when it comes sa atong values for our M and N. Okay? Wala right questions. Clarifications, violent reactions. Wala. Okay, none so far. Now, let's go to our number 3 example. So, here in our example number 3, we have negative 1, 2, negative 3, 4, negative 5, and then you have there plus dot, 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 and then negative 25. So, unsa atong manotice sa iyahang kuan class? The same ba ang symbols or ang signs niya?
No.
Okay, no. So, the signs are not the same. So, maybe, since nag-alternate man siya from negative and then positive, negative, positive. So, basin, nagkuanta niya no, nag-multiply og negative 1. Diba? It could be nag-multiply tag negative 1. Right? So, kung mag-multiply tag negative 1 niya class, so, unsa ka ato ang I ani? So, kung nag-multiply tag negative 1, kaya naman tayo negative diha. So, unsa man ang ma-apply nato nga expression ani or equation? Sorry kay class na namanday sa pikas balay. Okay. So, what if, kung negative 1 na siya niya, ato siyang erase og exponent nga 1. So, di ba negative 1 and then raised to the power of 1, that is negative 1. And then magkuan ta nga, 2 man sad ang sunod niya. Dapat, for example, atong 2 kay mo na siyang I. So, kung atong itry, we have there negative 1 and then raised to the power of 2. So, pila man na siya, class? Negative 1 raised to the power of 2.
1, sir.
That is still 1. So, ma-apply dili. 2 man ang next. Diba dili,
Dili.
no? Okay. So, now, mangita na sa tag other ways. Unsaon kahanin nato siya. Nga pwede siyang ma-apply. Pwede ba tang makapuno og lain nga ay? Yes. Actually, pwede ta makapuno og lain nga ay. Like, for example, here, negative 1 and then raised to the power of 1, which is mo ni siya tong I, and then mag-multiply na po tag I niya, or 1. So, negative 1 squared, that is negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1, that is negative 1. Now here, kung we're going to use negative 1 and then atong I ni sa babaw, and then i-multiply na po na to siya og I balik. So that is negative I times negative I, that is positive 1. Or negative 1 times negative 1, that is positive 1. And then negative 1 times 2, that is positive 2. So okay na siya, ma-apply ra siya sa second. So how about kanitong negative 3? Try daw to check if applicable ba siya.
Applicable, ma'am.
Okay, applicable na. So, applicable ra siya. So, it means to say we can use an expression which is negative 1 raised to the power of I and then times I. And then in which we're going to start with 1 and then ends with 25. Okay, so that is now your sigma notation. So here class, you need to do trial and error gyud. So basta mangita lang jud mo way nga dapat naa kay I. Okay, and then kanang I nimo is imo na siyang i-substitute, while ini ka substitute niya is manggawas imuhang mga terms sa gihatag nga sequence. Okay? So that is writing expression to sigma notation. Sige, questions? So far? Okay, none. Now, this time class, that's it for our sigma notation. Wala ragi questions? Okay ra? Okay, so for our next lesson is you need to brace yourself since we're gonna do principle of mathematical induction. Okay. So, unsa dining principle of mathematical induction? So, in principle of mathematical induction is we are going to prove a statement in which dapat true to all integers siya. Okay? That is principle of mathematical induction. So, dapat ato siyang itanawon nga applicable gyud ay ang tanan integers niya using that specific nga statements. So, in principle of mathematical induction is we are going to suppose P of n statement involving the positive integer. Also suppose that the following two conditions are satisfied. So, here in mathematical inductions class is we are going to do two kabuok nga ways or steps in which you have there your P sub 1, your P sub 1, okay, that is P sub 1 is true. Okay, in which you are going to use n is equal to 1. So, mara na siya tong part A. So, P sub 1 is true, in which n is equals to 1 is true as well. And then for our next step is we are going to use P is equals to, no, we have here n is equals to k, and then you're going to have the next step, which is P or n is equals to k plus 1. So, mo niya itong buhaton. We have here two steps. Ang first is, ang mga n nato is i-substitute ra nato into 1. And then, dapat true ang ihang answer at the end. And then, on the second step or in the second principle, it should be, ang imuhang mga n nimo kay i-change ninyo siya into k. And then, the last part is we are going to change all of the n into k plus 1. In which, the statement P of n is true for all positive integer values of n. So, taas-taas yun siya og pamaagi, pero ato lang siyang hinahinayan. So, using the principle of mathematical induction is we're going to have this example. So, we have there 1 plus 2, and then plus 3. We have here plus n, not plus n. We have there dot, 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 and then plus n is equal to n quantity n plus 1 over 2. So, ato ni siyang i-prove, class, nga all positive integers of n are true in this given nga sequence. So, what we're going to do first, mautong sa atong A, nga we're going to have n is equal to 1. Or we are going to show that n is equal to 1 and dapat true siya. So, we're just going to simply substitute using sa tuang gihatag nga formula dire sa kaning nasa kilid. So, you have there 1 is equal to, and then substitute ra nato ang kanisiya, values of n. So, 1, quantity 1 plus 1, that is over 2. So, you have there 1 is equal to 1, 1 plus 1 plus, that is 2, right? And then over 2, so kani siya is makancel, so you have there 1 is equal to 1. So meaning to say, the formula is true for n is equals to 1. Okay, pwede naman siya ibutang diha. The formula is true for n is equals to 1. Meaning to say, applicable siya for our A. Since na true man siya for our letter A, then now we can already proceed for our B. Okay? So, sa tuang B class is, kuan na po datong buhaton niya. We're going to assume, so mag-assume ta, that n is equal to k is true. Okay? N is equals to k is true. So, how are we going to assume this one? So, tanan mga n ganina class sa tuang given, kani siya, I change na to siya og k. Okay? So, you're going to write that one as 1 plus 2 plus 3 and then plus dot 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 k is equal to, and then you have there k, quantity k plus 1 over 2. So, as you can see, ako ra siyang gipang substitutean ng n class into k. And now, we are going to show that n is equal to k plus 1. Kanina sad atong dapat ma-true siya. Ang n is equals to k plus 1 is true. Okay, so anong daghan kita gi-equal sure kay naman to siya sa ihang principle. Sa tong makita ganina mo ni siya. N is equals to k and then n is equals to k plus 1 is true. So you have there ato siyang i-proceed. So ang kaning imuhang n dira, di ba? Sa tuang given ganina nga n is equals to k plus 1 naman ta. So niingon man ta nga sa tong given ganina is ang next aning k nato diri class is k plus 1. So next ani niya is k plus 1. So mobalik na sad ta sa tong gihatag ganina diri. So kani siya. So kani ang kaning mga n diri ato na sad siya himuon og k plus 1 class. Okay? So what will happen now to your given is mahimo na siya og 1 or sa imong given statement 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus k and then mag plus k plus 1 na ka, this one, and then equals, you have there k plus 1 and then quantity k plus 1 plus 1. Okay, that is k plus 1 plus 1. Yan na siya maklaro. Over 2. So, nga din kaning k plus 1 plus k plus 1 plus 1, sure. Gikan na siya diri class. Imo ra siya siyang kanang imong n, imong k diha, or kaning imong n ganina is imo ra siyang k plus 1. Kung sa previous is ato siyang n is equals to k, karon is ato na siya siyang n is equals to k plus 1. So, from this, kani siya, at nahimo siya into this statement. And then sa next one, di ba niingon man ta nga ang kanato ang n diha is equivalent ra man na siya sa ato ang kani. Di ba niingon ra man ta nga equivalent ra ni siya sa ato ang n. So kani siya ato ni siyang gamiton, ato siyang i-bring down. Or are na to siya isuwat. So you have there k, quantity k plus 1. Kay same raman daw na siya atong n nato ganina. So ato siyang gikuha, and then naman tay sobra nga k plus 1 diri. So ato ni siyang i-write as well. So siyang ipadap. So you have there k and then times k plus 1 over 2. And then on the other side is nag-plus ta og k plus 1. Then equals, ibutang ni nato ang kani siya. Kaning k, quantity k plus 1, then quantity k plus 1 plus 1. Plus 1 plus 1 over 2. Or pwede na nato siyang isuwat as k plus 2 kay 1 plus 1 equals 2 man. Then you're going to have 2 below. So, sa itong makita diri is dili pa siya equal, but still we can simplify this one. So, pangitaon na nato ang iyahang LCD which is 2, and then ato siyang i-divide diri sa ato ang kuan. 2 divided by 2, that is 1. So, 1 times k plus 1. So, pwede ra siyang idiretso og suwat. So, k and then times k plus 1 plus, di ba kanina man siya denominator nga 1 diha. So you can have divide 2 divided by 1, that is 2, and then 2 times k plus 1. And then equal lang gyapon na siya class ha, kulon siya ana. Equal gyapon na siya diha. Now, kani siya is pwede na tong kita iyahang factors. So, natay factors nga makita diri in which kaning k plus 1 o k plus 1 that is equal raman, diba? So, you can combine that one. So, you will have there k plus 1. Makombine na nimo siya. Well, ang nabilin diha, you have there k plus 2. So, i-group nimo imuhang k plus 2 and then you have there over 2. So, as you can see, same siya sa imuhang right. So, equal na sila. Okay, kani siya, same raman na siya. So, ma-factoran nimo kay same ra sila. So, we group that one. So, k plus 1. And then, gi-group po na to ang k plus 2. So, you have there. Over 2. And then, same siya diri sa pikas. So, therefore, we can say, okay, so therefore, the formula is true for all positive integers n. Kay ni-equal man siya class. So, na-prove na nga applicable day tanan integers sa given formula. And then, makita na nimo ang next nga mga numbers niya. Okay, so that is for our example in the principles of mathematical induction. Sige, questions? Questions, clarifications? Basta ato lang yun ni siyang unaw-naon class. We need to use n is equals to 1 is true. Kung true gani, makaproceed ta sa atong letter B. Kung di siya true class, maglisod na kaana, meaning to say not applicable na siya daan. Then we're going to proceed with our B, in which we're going to substitute all of our n into k. And then for the next one is, ato na dayon siyang gi, n is equals to k plus 1. Okay? Sige, questions. Muna siya ang letter A, and then this one is the letter B. So, sa letter B, class, ang atong gibuhat is ang katong pag n is equals to k na to, atong gikuha ang katong yung equivalent. And then, giplasan na to sa yahang k plus 1. And then, ang the other side is katong nang gisubstitute na to sa n plus 1. So, muna iyang result nga, na siya na ni diri. Ay, dire nalapas. This one. Sige, questions for example number 1. Wala man day ko nagtanaw sa chat. Wala man din ni chat. Wala ra? Sige, let's give another example ha. And we're going to use still our mathematical induction. Nga principle. So you have there, ang given niya is we're going to prove 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus n squared is equal to, wala, di mo daga ng mouse. N is equals to n times n plus 1. Then you have there 2n plus 1 over 6. So we're going to prove this one that all positive integers n can be used in this given statement. So, ato na sad ta sa mag-start sa tuang letter A, which is we're going to show that n is equal to 1 is true. So, atong gamiton is kani siya. Atong i-substitute. So, you have there n squared man na diha class no. So, 1 squared is equivalent to tanan value sa n mo class ha imong i-substitute. And then 1 plus quantity 1 plus 1, quantity 2 times 1 plus 1 over 6. So you have there 1 squared, that is equivalent to 1. And then here we have 1 plus 2. And then this one is 2 times 1, 2 plus 1, that is 3. Then you have there 1 is equals to 1 plus 2 plus 3, that is 6. And then 6 divided by 6, that is 1. So meaning to say, we have there n is equals to 1 is true. So makaproceed na dayon ta sa tuang letter B. So in our letter B, we're going to assume that n is equals to k. So i-assume na to siya nga n is equals to k, and which is true siya. Okay, nag-assume na ta diri ha nga true ang n is equals to k. So ato ra tong i-substitute ganina, so you have there 1 squared plus 2 squared. 2 squared plus you have there 3 squared plus katong ganina nga n, ma-change siya into k. And then squared is equals to, change lang gihapon. So you have there k quantity k plus 1. And then you have there 2k plus 1. 2k plus 1 over 6 na dayon siya. So, asa ni nato gikan? Naara na siya diri. Ato rang gipang substitute og k ang atong mga n. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Now, this time is we are going to show now that n is equals to k plus 1 is true. Ato siyang change into n plus n is equals to k plus 1. So, you have there ang kani siyang kasunod aning k squared plus, that is k plus 1 squared. Okay, so you have there 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus, and then dot dot dot, k squared is plus pagyud ka, and then quantity k plus 1 squared. Okay, so nagpuno ta og isa diri, which is kaning k plus 1 squared. And then on the other side, ang kaning katong mga n nato ganina diri is mo na pud atong i-substitute og k plus 1. Okay, so ato siyang, so mahimo siya og ano na to sa ubos ibutang kay di na masud. So you have there k plus 1, and then k plus 1 plus 1, and then quantity 2, quantity 2 k plus 1, then plus 1 na sad over 6. Okay, so asa ni siya gikan class? Diri ni siya gikan sa tuang n, quantity n plus 1. So you have there n, so that is k plus 1. And then you have there quantity n plus 1, so k plus 1 plus 1. And then you have there 2 times n naman sa siya. So 2 quantity k plus 1, then plus 1 over 6. Okay? So now, since we're done substituting naman for our k plus 1, that's the time nga mag-solve na ta sa atuang para ma-prove na to nga kuan jud siya, equivalent or equal siya. So, ang imong buhaton ana, since ningon man ta nga ang kani siya, di ba, ang kani siya nga part 3 kani, is that is equivalent man siya ani. Di ba? Parihara man na siya ani. Sa atong kani. Ang kani siya, kani nga part is same ra siya ani. Because as you can see, naman ta diha, 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared plus k squared, equivalent siya ani. So, meaning to say, ang kani siya, nga part 3, 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared, is kani atong isuwat niya. And then, mag-plus lang ta og k plus 1 squared. So, kung ato siyang suwaton plus, you can have k, quantity k plus 1, 2k plus 1. And then, over 6. So, mo ni siya nga part das ha. Ang kani siya, mo ni akong gikuha diri. K plus 1, 2k plus 1. And then, i-add lang ni nato siya. Kay equivalent man daw. Napa man siya sobra. Not equivalent. Tapa man siya sobra. So, ato ra siyang i-write. So, plus k plus 1 squared. So, we have there k plus 1 squared. Then, sa katong pikas nga side, is mo lang gyapon ni siya itong isuwat last kani siya. Kani. Ato lang siyang ipagamay. In which mag-simplify ta. So, kani siya k plus 1 din na siya mas-simplify. So, gamay lugar eh. K plus 1 squared is equal to, katong k plus 1 din naman siya ma-simplify. So, copy. And then, kani siya, you have there k plus 1 plus 1, that is k plus 2. And then, this one is, pwede pa siyang ma-distribute. So, you have there 2k plus 2, diba? 2k plus 2, and then 2 plus 1, that is 3. So, we can write 2k plus 3. Okay, ako na siyang i-distribute ha. So, 2 times k, 2k, 2 times 1, 2. So, and then 2 plus 1, that is 3. So, ako na siyang i-distribute. So, now, copy the denominator nga 6. And then, kaning nasa left na to is mo na ni siya to ang i-simplify. So, how are we going to simplify this one? Pwede na to siya kuhaan og LCD. So, for their LCD, that is 6. So, kani siya, 6 divided by 6, 1. 1 times k plus 1, 2k plus 1. So, pwede na to siyang isuwat diretso. So, i-copy na lang na to siya. So, you have there k plus 1, quantity 2k plus 1. And then, sa kani, 6 divided by, naman siya over 1 diha. 6 divided by 1, that is 6. So, we're just going to multiply. Ay, napade siya k diri ka, sorry. Napa siya k diri sa pikas. So, pwede na to siyang i-multiply here na lang sa kilid. Sorry. Ari na lang siyang apart. K quantity 2k plus 1. Then, ari sa pikas is mag-divide na dayon ta. Or, pwede na lang nato siyang kapihon. So, you can have there 6 quantity k plus 1. Then, squared. Okay. And then, this one, kaning nasa right, pwede na lang siyang kapihon. And next step, ani class, is ato siyang i-simplify. So, ato siyang i-simplify. So, you will have k plus 1. So, kani siya k plus 1. Then, kani ato siyang i-distribute. So, you will have there k plus 1. And then, k times 2k, that is 2k squared. And then this one, k times 1, that is 1. Or that is k. 1k or k. And then, ang kanisya is pwede po na to siyang ma-distribute. So, you have there 6k plus 6. And then, next, is copy the denominator since pwede naman siyang ikuan. And then, as you can see here, kanisya is we can combine. So, pwede nimo siya mahimog 7k. So, naitabuan niya, it will be k plus 1, and then quantity 2k squared plus 7k plus 6. Since trinomial man siya, we can um, factor this out. So, inika-factor nimo niya, you can get k plus 1 and then quantity. Ang factor ani niya kay 3 o 2 man, 'di ba? Because 6 man siya. Then we have here 2 pa man. So, you can write 2k plus 3 and then k plus 2. So, you know how to factor naman plus. So, inyo ni siyang i-factor and then mo ni siyang result over 6. And then, if ato siyang i-check kung maubag gyapon siya sa babaw, which is k plus 1 and then k plus 2, 2k plus 3. So, we have here k plus 1, k plus 2, and 2k plus 3 over 6. So, they are equal. So, meaning to say, therefore, all positive integers n are true in this given statement. Or all positive integer n is true for this statement. Okay, questions? Taas biya gyud siya pagi class, need gyud siya og kanang solve gani. Useful kayo ang ato ang rational function, ang ato ang mga discussion before like factoring, use gihapon siya ani. Questions? Kutaw ng utok. Sige, questions, clarifications.
Wala, not sure.
Wala ra. Okay, so if wala right questions, you can watch the recorded video na lang if ever wala pa gyud kayo kasabot. Okay? So, that is the end for our principle of mathematical induction. So, you need to prove gyud nga equal sila at the end by using the katong A and B, in which you're going to assume and you're going to show some of those important things like n is equals to 1 and then n is equals to k, and next step is you're going to have the n is equals to k plus 1. Okay? So, if no questions, class, I think, wow, sayo tanong man, 1:55. So, I think we're going to end here, okay? Okay, Ra? Okay, so, goodbye everyone, and then just prepare for your short quiz lang about mathematical or principle of mathematical induction. So, goodbye and keep safe.
Bye, chair. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye,
sir.
sir. Thank you.